Did Pablo Escobar cause a bunch of hippos to terrorize Colombia almost 30 years after his death? The internet says it's true. Well, hey there, and welcome to The Internet Says It's True, where every week we're going to learn something that sounds like I just made it up out of thin air, but it's really true, part of the WCBE podcast experience and available on all podcast platforms as well as the NPR app and website. My name is Michael Kent. This is episode 204. 204 episodes. I'm currently hanging out in the last frontier, Alaska. I'm up in Fairbanks doing a few shows for the Army stationed up there. So this week is a rewind episode, one that I was just talking about to a friend. I think it's an incredible story, and it's one that, as far as I know, is still ongoing. Some Tiziter news. I did upload 5 live shows from the road on Patreon for the Gold members. You can sign up to see those at patreon.com/Michael Kent. Once again, those are available to anyone who joins at the Gold level. But for everyone, no matter what level, even free trial members, get access to all of the videos of interviews each week, ad-free episodes, and tons of other goodies there. You can sign up today to be a Tiziter at patreon.com/Michael Kent.
I am once again asking for your financial support.
Also, don't forget to pick up your show t-shirts and your show mugs. They're awesome quality. You can get those on our website. That's theinternetsaysitstrue.com. This episode that you're about to hear was first released on June 27th of 2022, just a couple years ago. Our guest was John Fugelsang, and you'll see later there was a certain issue that we did not agree on. This episode idea came from a caller.
Hey, Michael, it's Mitch from Dublin, Ohio. Hey, I recently read about Colombia's cocaine hippos. I think you should check that out and do an episode on that one. Thanks.
Immediately, when I heard this, I got really excited for a story about cocaine-fueled hippos. That's not what this is. This is a story about hippos that have a nickname cocaine hippos because, well, everything about the Pablo Escobar story has to do with cocaine. For this one, we've got to travel to the Magdalena River Basin in the heart of Colombia. There's a spot about 3 hours' drive from the city of Medellin, known as Hacienda Nápoles. These days, there's a small water park and zoo, but if you look around, you'll see the foundations of demolished buildings. Those buildings in the small town of Puerto Triunfo, demolished almost 30 years ago, used to be the grand palace of the famed Colombian cocaine kingpin, Pablo Escobar. At the height of his operation, Pablo Escobar had everything. His net worth was $30 billion, equivalent to around twice that in today's money. He was the world's richest man in 1989, and his cocaine cartel was earning him $420 million a week at its peak. He owned 141 houses, 142 airplanes, 20 helicopters, 32 yachts, and to this day, he's sort of seen as both a villain and a hero. The reason that he leaves a complicated legacy is that to many people, he ran a drug cartel that devastated several nations in their effort to combat drug crime and the crimes associated with it. He supplied 85% of the cocaine that the world was consuming. His reign killed over 4,000 civilians, 1,000 police officers, 200 judges, and included unspeakable violence, including the purposeful bombing of Avianca Flight 203, which killed over 100 innocent people. I really want to make sure I'm not making light of the horrible effects of Escobar and the Medellin drug cartel. The reason that he's seen as a hero in Colombia, specifically to poorer members of society, is that when you're that powerful in an impoverished area that's riddled with corruption, you're the one supplying the money, houses, and jobs to the community. For people who were in Medellin in the 80s and 90s, they remember a Pablo Escobar that provided the community with thousands of houses, a city sanitation system, parks, soccer fields, schools, cars, and buses. Due to the fact that he had so much money, his riches truly did trickle down to the economy of Medellin. That's why, in addition to a water park and zoo, the tourist attraction at Hacienda Nápoles includes a Pablo Escobar museum. It showcases some of the vehicles, cars, and airplanes that he owned, as well as some of the burned ruins of his house. People revere him and wonder at the memory of his legacy, even though Escobar was a man that caused severe pain and anguish throughout Colombia, Mexico, and the United States. A man like Escobar could have whatever he wanted, and at one point in the late 1970s, What he wanted were 4 hippos. Let's talk about hippos for a minute.
Hippos have a formidable reputation. Across Africa, they kill around 500 people every year.
There's only one part of the world where the hippopotamus lives in its natural habitat: sub-Saharan Africa. It's up there with the elephant and the rhinoceros as one of the top 3 largest land animals, weighing in at over 3,000 pounds fully grown. Despite their giant size, they can run up to 30 miles an hour on land and are one of the deadliest land animals. Back in their home region of Africa, hippos kill 500 people a year. They don't have too many predators in the animal kingdom, and they're constantly facing threats from humans, including poachers and the effects of the war in the Congo. This has given the African hippopotamus a vulnerable status from the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And because they are so freaking rare, you can't just buy hippos because you want to see them roaming around your house. That is, unless your name is Pablo Escobar and you're the richest drug trafficker in history. We'll have more after a quick break from some sponsors. If you love listening to this podcast every week and you want to show your support, that would mean a great deal to me. You can do that by becoming a Patreon member. We've got members at all levels, whether you want to pledge $1 a month or $10 a month. Just think about the value that you receive from this show. And if you like the histories and the stories that you learn about or the jokes that you hear, and if you think that they're worth it, consider signing up. For that, you get every episode ad-free and a week early, access to bonuses like the unedited videos of the guest appearances, and 20% off all merchandise. You can sign up today at patreon.com/Michael Kent. That's patreon.com/Michael Kent. There was a time that humans used 100% organic products as healing balms and moisturizers for their skin. Well, I've partnered with an awesome company that wants to get back to those times. Fatco sells organic and responsibly made tallow-based skincare products. For centuries, humans used tallow in skin moisturizers and healing balms, but unfortunately, the topical application of these fats seemed to stop around the same time that animal fats stopped being considered part of a healthy diet. A lot of modern skincare products do more harm than good by stripping your skin of its natural oils. Let's change that. You can try them out now at fatco.com and get 15% off your order by using my promo code INTERNET. Go to theinternetsayitstrue.com/deals for the link.
I'm John DeSando, host of Back Talk. This podcast is an extension of the long-running, award-winning movie review show, It's Movie Time. Back Talk features additional content and banter with guests about new movies. If you want more insight and information about what's playing now in theaters and online, find Back Talk at the WCBE Podcast Experience on WCBE.org. You'll be happy you did.
We're living through the most dynamic time in human history, and what we do as leaders matter. We are the ones that create the leverage to shift directions of our companies, our nonprofits, and our communities. As a leader or an emerging leader, please join me for a dynamic conversation with top thought leaders, academics, and executives to learn more about how to elevate your leadership. I'm Maureen Metcalf. Join us at the WCBE Podcast Experience at WCBE.org.
Let's get back to the show. It started with just 4 hippos. He had a dream of having the biggest private zoo in the world, so Pablo Escobar illegally smuggled 3 females and 1 male hippopotamus from Africa to his ranch at Hacienda Nápoles. This initial bloat of hippos was allowed to graze on his Puerto Triunfo property. He showed them off to friends and was proud of the hippos. I mentioned a little bit earlier about how influential and powerful Pablo Escobar was. It was because of his influence and political connections that when he was arrested for a 5-year prison term in 1991, he was allowed to build his own self-built prison, La Catedral, which was basically just another home. And even then, he couldn't stand to be in prison and escaped from the home. 2 years later, Pablo Escobar was found and killed in a shootout with the National Police of Colombia. At this point, the government of Colombia seized and/or destroyed a lot of Escobar's property. The planes, the cars, the houses. But when it came to the hippos, they simply didn't have any way of handling them. The hippos roamed free and couldn't be rounded up. They were left on his Hacienda Nápoles estate. These days, if you visit Hacienda Nápoles, You'll drive through a big white gate with an airplane on top of it. It's a replica of the airplane Escobar used to smuggle his first shipments of cocaine. There are water park slides, a small zoo, and a couple small museums and attractions. Gone are the private airport, the mansion, the many buildings, the racetrack, the brothel, the tennis courts, but not the spirit of Pablo Escobar, like the giant dinosaur sculptures he had constructed for his son. His burned-out car collection is still there for all to see, and while most of his zoo animals were sent to other zoos in and out of Colombia, the hippos still roam free. One of them, named Vanessa, even answers to her name. By 2007, the 4 original hippos had grown to a pod of 16. By 2014, locals were counting as many as 40 hippos. And now in 2022, it's suspected that the Magdalena River Basin is home to more than 100 hippos, all roaming free in a land where they have no predators and where the climate and food sources are perfect for them to thrive. The Magdalena River is slow-moving, which is ideal for them, and the region never experiences droughts, which is one of the factors that curb hippo populations in Africa. They seem to have evolved to mostly be more tame than their African counterparts, though there have been a few dangerous encounters. These Colombian hippos are also reaching sexual maturity at an earlier age than in their natural African habitat. A normal hippo starts giving birth around 9 to 11 years old, but the offspring of Escobar's hippos are as active as young as 3. It's not all sunshine and rainbows for these hippos. They're still incredibly dangerous animals, and they're spreading further and further away from the Hacienda Nápoles estate. Some have been found 155 miles from Puerto Triunfo. Fishermen in the Magdalena River are justifiably terrified of them. Ranchers and farmers have had run-ins with them as they eat valuable crops and have even trampled small cows. In 2020, one hippo ran down and injured a farmer, but to this day, they've not killed any people. The question of what to do with Colombia's hippos is a constant source of debate within the country. When authorities killed one of the hippos in 2009, the public became upset. Some see the small population of thriving hippos as a sort of conservation of a species that's vulnerable back in Africa. Others see it as an extension of Escobar's legacy. But Colombian authorities are concerned with the population, which they say could pose a threat to the region's natural biodiversity. Their hope is to castrate the male hippos of the bloat. They argue that the giant animals could possibly carry disease and are seen as an invasive species. If unchecked, the hippo population in Colombia will grow to 400 in the next 8 years. By 2035, that number will be 1,500. 1,500 hippos in Colombia. It will be at that point, they say, that tragic interactions between Colombian citizens and hippos will be unavoidable. In 2021, an American court determined that Colombian hippos could be given legal status as people, but this obviously has zero bearing on what happens in Colombia. As of right now, no definite plan has been agreed upon, and no one is quite sure what to do with Colombia's cocaine hippos. So they remain, wandering the Magdalena River Basin and reminding everyone of the infamous drug kingpin who introduced them. It is time for the part of the podcast where I call a friend. Today, we're going to talk with John Fugelsang. John is a comedian and political commentator. You can hear him as the host of the John Fugelsang podcast and on Tell Me Everything, Monday through Friday on Sirius XM. John Fugelsang, it's so good to see you again.
Nice to see you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
I had you on my Joke Story Trick Show, which was like a web show that I did last year. It was a lot of fun. You told a story, but I believe you told your David Duke story from the Bill Maher show. I have looked all over for this footage, and I can't find that episode anywhere because it was back in like 99 or something.
Yeah, that's probably a good thing. It was in 2000 or 2001. It was when Bill was still doing the show every night on ABC, and it was plenty ugly. But yeah. Someday I'll ask for a copy of it from his people. But my proudest moment when I offered hot gay sex to a Nazi Klansman to make him stop.
It's such an amazing story, and you can actually hear John tell that story on Joke Story Trick, which is all of the old back episodes of Joke Story Trick are available to Patreon members, but. I have you on here. You don't know what the topic is, and that's a little scary for someone to come on a show completely unprepared. But that's the way it is for everyone. That's like what we try to do is just The topic of my podcast, the theme is, these are things that sound fake but are absolutely true. And every week I cover one of those topics. And so this week it's about, I'm going to ask you this first question, and it might be a story that you're very familiar with. It might be something you've never heard of before, but we're going to play for a joke. So for the first question, if you get it right, I have to tell you a joke. And if you get it wrong, you'll tell me one.
Oh,
Sound
I had
good?
no idea. I would have listened to my Blue Collar Comedy Tour tapes and had some jokes. Go ahead.
I did not prepare a joke. That's why I have a whole bunch of old joke books on the shelf behind me, because if you do get this question right, I'm going to have you tell me a page, and we're just going to pick a random joke, assuming that it's not racist, sexist, misogynist, one of these.
Now I'm completely terrified. Great.
I didn't mean to bring you on and terrify you, John. Here is the question. Colombia is facing a strange problem as a result of Pablo Escobar's reign as a cocaine kingpin almost 30 years ago. Which one of these is that problem? Is it A, a herd of over 100 hippos wreaking havoc on the local population? B, a riverbed leaching cocaine into the water supply of nearby towns? Or C, cocaine is still being found hidden inside of used cars 30 years later?
That would be C. Cocaine is still being found inside of used cars.
You said that like you were so sure. The answer, John, is A, a herd of over 100 hippos wreaking havoc on the local population. But you said that with such a convincing tone that now I'm wondering if this is maybe a story that I made. I thought I made this up, but it's something you've heard about. Or was that just
no?
amazing?
That's just I very boldly go for a wrong answer. It's how I did the SATs. It was my entire studying approach.
It's good. No, so Pablo Escobar smuggled illegally 4 hippos in the late 70s, and those hippos have been allowed to roam on his former property and are now thriving. And there are over 100 of them, and they don't know what to do about this because hippos can be very dangerous in Africa. In Colombia, they haven't killed anyone yet, but they're like, if they keep growing, they're going to.
You finally found a topic that Narcos didn't have a budget to give an episode to.
I was amazed that they didn't. When I heard this, I was like, this should have been an episode of Narcos.
Why didn't Narcos have the hippos episode, for God's sakes?
Yeah, maybe the animatronic hippos were too expensive. I have no idea. I really don't know. But there were only 4 of them at that point, and they think that if they're left unchecked, by 2035, there are going to be 1,500 of these hippos. And right now, the thing with Pablo Escobar in Colombia is that he's sort of revered at the same time that he is hated, because he supplied so much wealth to the poor communities back when it was a corrupt nation, and so they don't want to get rid of the hippos because they sort of see that as the legacy of this hero of theirs. It's a crazy story. There have been a couple documentaries on it.
Popular with the people, but I guess who's feeding these hippos? Who's maintaining them? Who's paying for their upkeep?
They're 100% self-sustaining in nature now. So the Magdalena River, which is
sort of like the drug war.
It is, yeah. It's sort of left on its own. Now there's not this kingpin running it. And the hippos are thriving because that's apparently, the Magdalena River is like a slow-moving river, which is great for them. And they're eating crops, which the farmers don't like, obviously. But they don't have any predators in Colombia, and this river there's no drought, which is what kills hippos in Africa, apparently.
Wow,
it's absolutely crazy story. So, do you have a joke? Quick joke?
Sure. I don't know if you know this, but Kid Rock might be running for the governor of Michigan. This is very scary to some people, but Kid Rock, my generation's Leonard Cohen, might run for governor of Michigan. And if this happens, I just want to promise all your listeners, I will run against him. I will run against him after changing my name to Kid Paper.
Oh,
that is my pledge.
Please tell me that would, if that actually happened.
Yeah. There's also a Kid Scissors, but I won't run with him.
No. Yeah. That's solid. I wasn't expecting actual material there. I'm very impressed.
I wasn't expecting to have to tell a joke. So were you?
I told you there was no prep.
Your listeners are still waiting for the funny part, so we're all tied here.
I'm laughing. That's the most important part. So for this next question, we're going to play, instead of like an admission of guilt, we're going to play for an admission of something that we do well. So if you get it wrong, You've got to tell us something you're good at. If you get it right, I'll tell you something I'm good at. Fair? Here's your question. When Pablo Escobar was hiding from authorities, what did he reportedly do to keep his family warm? A, he cut open a hippo like a tauntaun and climbed inside. B, he literally burned $2 million in cash. Or C, he gave them cocaine and told them to keep moving.
I know this for a fact. He burned cash.
You are correct. His daughter fell ill while they were in hiding, and he was rumored to have started a bonfire using the cash they were traveling with, burning as much as $2 million. Now, that I believe they did do in Narcos.
Oh, yes.
I think they told
and I think the child said it costs a fortune to heat this place. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. That counts for your first joke if you want. If they didn't like the first one, they get the second one. Yeah. Actually, I found an article from the son, from Pablo Escobar's son, who is featured in Narcos, who said that never happened, that they never burned the money. But, when the legend is cooler than the fact, print the legend. So,
right on.
I think I was on your IMDb, and I was looking for when that David Duke episode of Politically Incorrect happened. And I saw that you had interviewed George Harrison and Ravi Shankar way back when. And I went and I watched it. And I am amazed at this point. I mean, I've always been, a fan of yours, but I'm like, now I'm gushing because holy crap. There are some amazing quotes from George Harrison in this thing. How did that come about? You had worked with VH1 prior to that.
I had. And I was actually on my way that day to go fly to London to do a live TV special with Paul McCartney.
What?
And I was doing a live special, like international live special from Bishopsgate in London with Paul. And they called me up and said, hey, we're going to need you to leave a day later because we need you in New York. And I'm like, oh, damn it. Why? I've never been to London. They said, well, we need you here with George Harrison and Ravi Shankar. And I mean, I love all four Beatles. I don't think you can really truly be a Beatles fan without being deep into their solo careers. And George had meant a lot to me. My parents were ex-Catholic clergy. And so like George, I had grown up quite Catholic. And like George, I had tried to deepen my spiritual world beyond that. And he was a big figure to me spiritually and creatively and musically. The first solo Beatle record I ever got as a teenager was his Cloud 9 album with Jeff Lynne. That's what kind of got me into him in the first place. Before I knew My Sweet Lord, I knew Got My Mind Set on You. I was kind of a late bloomer.
Yeah.
And so he came in with Robbie, and it's a long, long story. They were only supposed to be there for about 10 minutes. We were going to get our sound bite and let him go. And in the beginning, there was nobody there. It was very empty. And I knew if I talked about the Beatles, he'd get up and leave. He didn't like doing that. So I talked about God and the soul and what happens when you die and meditation. And he must have liked the fact that I was the worst interviewer of all time because he hung in there, and he eventually stayed for 4 hours. I gave him a guitar that belonged to the girlfriend of one of our crew members, and he played 4 songs.
Oh my God.
Robbie had a sitar. We were not planning on live music, but they played, and he played 4 things he had never played live before, and he hadn't toured in America since the 70s.
Wow.
In over 20 years. So by the time it was over, the room was filled. The editor of Billboard was there, and Rick Rubin was there. Tom Petty's daughter was there because she was our intern at the time, and she's gone on to be a great figure in the music industry in her own right, Adria Petty.
Yeah.
And George's son Donnie was there. And, they put it out as a special, a 30-minute special that nobody watched. And the whole time I was talking to him, they kept saying in my ear, stop talking about God and death, talk about John Lennon. But I knew he wouldn't want to do that. So a couple of years, right after this, George was diagnosed and he got sick. And I was up in Montreal at the Comedy Festival, and they called me and said, we want to recut this thing. Would you fly down to New York? And I did. And they put all the spirituality back in the special. So on the day George died, they aired so much footage that had never been seen before. And it was George and this 25-year-old kid talking about death and what happens when you die and God and the soul. And to this day, I'll have guys walk up to me and hug me and say that it's rare they see anything so spiritual on TV. And it was a nice lesson in, sometimes when you think you're doing something all wrong it might take a few years to realize that you were making the right call. And I learned a lot from that experience, and I continue to learn a lot from him from that day.
Absolutely incredible. Now, did you then fly to London the next day and meet with Paul?
Oh, yeah. I have pictures of me.
What did Paul say
George.
about what you had just done with George?
Oh, well, we went straight from the studio to the airport, and I got on the red eye. I have a picture of me and my uncle in Ipswich the next morning, and I'm wearing the same clothes I'm wearing with George in the studio pictures. It was disgusting. Paul's people thought, Paul just said, "Oh, he'll talk to you, but he won't talk to me."
Oh,
And
wow.
they thought that was kind of funny. And his people were kind of shocked that George would play 4 songs with me and do all that, because their relationship was what it was. They loved each other very much, but it didn't always go that smoothly.
Wow. That's an incredible story behind the story. I appreciate that you sharing that with us.
By the way, I just saw Paul close his tour the other night here in Jersey, and he turns 80 today, the day we're taping this. Today's his 80th birthday.
Wow.
And this was 2 nights ago, and it's one of the best shows I ever saw him give. He was amazing.
Now, on your most recent podcast, you talked about this fact that it's kind of amazing. The band he's playing with now is the longest band that he's had, the longest group that he's had together by far in his career.
By far. People forget the Beatles only toured with Ringo for 4 years.
Yeah.
Ringo joined the band in 62, and they stopped touring in 66. And Wings famously had a constantly evolving lineup. Paul and Linda were the only constants. Paul began touring as a solo artist in 89, and he's had this band since 2001, 2002. And 20 years, by far, the longest touring ensemble he's ever held together. So they're great. Springsteen came out and played with them at the show the other night for a couple of songs. And he's 80, and I think he's going to keep on doing it for years to come. He's so solid. He
doesn't sound or look 80 at all. Pretty
being a very healthy vegetarian billionaire can do wonders for your abilities, I think.
Right.
I got to try it.
Right. So for question 3, we're playing for a coveted sticker. It's an internet says it's true sticker. It's a low budget show. Which one of these was not an official nickname for Pablo Escobar? So I'm going to list 3. One of them was not an actual nickname. A, El Patron, B, Robin Hood, or C, Don Jr.?
Well, Robin Hood, El Patron, I'm sure they called him that. Robin Hood being in English makes me think maybe not, although maybe the CIA called him that. Don Jr. seems so weird that I'm going to go with that one.
The answer is Don Jr. They have a lot in common, I think, Pablo Escobar and Don Jr., but they did not call him Don Jr. He was known as Robin Hood. He was known as El Patron. He was known as a few other things, but not Don Jr.
They have a lot in common, except Pablo Escobar worked a lot harder, and I think maybe Don Jr. bought more of what Pablo sold. I don't think Pablo
was a customer
took too much.
I think, the fact that Pablo Escobar built something from the ground up is definitely
yes. Well, in fairness, when Don Jr. shows up for his first day in prison, it'll be the first time in his life he's ever gotten anywhere all on his own.
Don't we hope? The night before the January 6th hearings began, I was just feeling very pessimistic, and I was feeling like this isn't going to do anything. This isn't going to help. I had watched, everything that had been done, up to that point. And then I watched those first hearings on prime time. I said I wasn't going to watch it, and then I watched it. And I've watched all 3, and I'm filled with hope now. I'm filled with hope. The fact that
I don't care if he goes to jail for the past. I'm more worried about the future. I'm more worried about the effective fascist who can pull it off, who's not a narcissist reality show racist clown, but who's smooth enough to pull off that kind of theft. I don't need to see Trump go to jail. I don't need to see if Orange clashes with Orange. I feel like he's going to be shoveling money to defense attorneys for the rest of his life. He's already in penance. I'd love to see him run for president again, because we've never, ever in the history of this country seen a man lose the popular vote 3 times. And Trump's the only guy with a shot to do it. So, to me, whatever happens to him doesn't matter. I don't want him to suffer. I want 3 ghosts to visit him on Christmas Eve and turn him into a good person. That's where I'm.
They say the only thing worse than charging Trump would be not charging Trump. They're both horrible outcomes.
And I think he's going to be charged in the state of New York. He's going to be charged in the state of Georgia. I think those are much more likely than federal charges against him, because these are Democrats we're talking about. They're a bit timid when it comes to that sort of thing, and I don't think they're going to want to be seen in the history books as being punitive. I think history will show there were 2 impeachments. History will show there were these hearings that we, the people, tried to stand up against these injustices, against these crimes. Mm-hmm. But I mean, maybe Merrick Garland's made of things I don't know. I heard he got so mad watching those hearings, he almost ripped the tassels off his loafers, almost. But, at the same time, Merrick Garland, they prosecuted the Unabomber, the Oklahoma City case. There were no leaks and full convictions. So maybe he just plays a very long game.
Could be.
I don't know, but
well, what you're talking about with the Democrats is forgiveness, and we're seeing.
No, I'm not talking about forgiveness at all. No, I'm not talking about forgiveness at all. I'm talking about being tepid.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing, and what I'm.
Forgiveness has to be sought, Michael.
I think that what we're looking at, though, with these hearings is we're giving credence to these people who did horrible, horrible things because they did the right thing during this very important moment. And so we're looking at Bill Barr, we're looking at, Bill Steppins, all these people that did these and continue to do horrible things.
Yes.
And saying, we are lifting you up right now in front of the world, and we want to be seen as people who are treating you as a hero, which is the right move to do, because we need to get people on this side of the argument.
I think you can say that Donald Trump has raised the bar on lowering the bar. And I mean, William Barr has covered up more shit than cat litter. People forget after these statements he made on tape about how it was all bullshit and how it was all lies, and this man has taken leave of his senses. He went and did a book tour and said he would vote for Trump again.
Yeah.
Mike Pence, my God, maybe the worst thing Trump ever did is make future history books turn Mike Pence into a hero. 100 years from now, they'll be saying brave Mike Pence. And I'm like, no, he was the biggest homophobe of all the governors in America. That's why he got the job. Mike Pence was horrible. Mike Pence had to, when Dan Quayle is saving the Republic, that's how bad, things have gotten. Yeah. Mike Pence tried every way he could to not do the right thing. And finally, he knew he had to do the right thing. Mike Pence is all the evil with twice the hypocrisy and half the comedy value. But, and Liz Cheney, I mean, my God, we're all praising Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney is just like Dick Cheney if Dick Cheney told the truth about one thing. That's really it. I mean, Dick Cheney killed 1 million people over a lie. Liz Cheney killed her career over the truth.
Wow.
So I believe in praising people when they do the right thing. But in fairness, Michael, I mean, you and I don't sign on to help overthrow the U.S. government almost every week. It's not that hard to not try to overthrow the government. So really great that these guys didn't commit treason.
Yeah.
But, I only commit treason like twice, maybe 3 times a year. So it's not that hard to pull off.
Well, let's keep moving on with the quiz. And it's I really like to talk about things that have nothing to do with the quiz in between, because I don't want to spend 20 to 30 minutes talking about hippos. But
I'm on a roll now. I got 2 out of 3 of these right, Michael. I'm doing well. So
you're doing very well. And for this question, if you get it wrong, you've got to give us a book recommendation. If you get it right, I'll recommend a book.
Okay.
Which one of these facts is true about hippos? So one of these, true. A, they can't swim. B, they have one mate for life. C, their hooves shed naturally.
They can't swim, they have one mate for life, or their hooves shed naturally?
One of those is true.
The only one of those that's true is their hooves shed naturally.
Unfortunately, the answer, John, is they can't swim. Hippos are not swimmers.
Hippos do swim. What are you talking about?
So hippos spend a ton of time in the water. They have to walk on the bottom of the riverbed. So you'll only ever see hippos in shallow water. The hippos they need the water to cool off. They need the water to breed. They lay their babies in the water. Even the hippo babies suckle the mom's teat underwater, but they are not a swimming animal.
I'm looking up right now. I see hippos. Hippos are graceful in water, good swimmers, and
Now,
can
wait a
hold their
minute.
breath underwater for up to
Wait a
5
minute.
minutes. I'm
We
gonna
have
have to appeal to the judges.
We
on
have to
this.
check with the judges on this.
I'm gonna have to look for images and videos and send you. I'm sure
I see what you are seeing from National Geographic, and it does not get.
Yes.
Now the next article down from the Atlantic is titled "Hippos Can't Swim." For all intents and purposes, the hippo does not swim, says an assistant professor
You know
in the
what?
department.
And the Atlantic was for the Iraq War. You believe everything they say? You trust the Atlantic on hippos?
I am going to go to our
Geographic?
judges. It turns out that our judges are defaulting to the National Geographic. They're giving you the point. They say the Atlantic.
Can hippos swim? Hippopotamuses cannot swim. Ah!
Alexa said no.
I can't. There's no higher authority in my world than Alexa.
Well, you know what? Now I see it both ways. Now that I say this, I did watch a fair amount of hippo documentary before writing this episode, and I did see hippos swimming through water, but just like down to get to the bottom and then back up.
I think that counts as swimming, Michael.
I think what it is a definition of what is swimming, and if you can move through the water, I think that's a swim.
I'm not saying they can do the English Channel, sir, but my God, I've seen hippos swim in documentaries myself.
And I am inclined to give the debate.
Henry, hang on, I got a 10-year-old.
Okay.
Henry, come here. I'm going to have to go to my other judge. Henry,
this is a great judge.
Can hippos swim? My 10-year-old says they can swim, so that beats
Tell
Alexa.
Henry to ask Alexa.
He's in the bathroom. He's already mad at me for yelling at him.
All right. Well, we're gonna give it to you just because of the fact that a quick Google result says National Geographic says it's true. Screw the Atlantic. What do I know? I don't know.
David Frum wrote the line "Axis of Evil." That's all I'm going to say about that. What Iran and Iraq are in an axis? Okay, Frum, sure. He's been wrong before, sir.
At this point,
I think it comes down to what you said about what constitutes swimming. I don't think they could, cross the Mississippi, but they can get around okay.
Now, I will say, your answer for this was C. They shed their hooves naturally, and hippos have toes with toenails and no hooves. So incorrect.
I knew they weren't monogamous. I knew they weren't monogamous. Hippos are some freaks. Let me tell you, there's a fetish for everybody, and I'll tell you, hippos are definitely not monogamous. That's all I want to say about that.
Well, based on just my shoddy research, I'm going to give you that point and say that you went 3 for 4 so far.
It's a tainted point. It's a tainted point. I don't feel right taking it, but okay.
It's fine. Well, you know what? Out of this, you get a book recommendation, if nothing else. And there's something that I just picked up that was recommended to me by a local historian. It's a weird book, but it has something to do with our conversation with January 6th. This is about when Harry Truman was leaving office. The book is called Harry Truman's Excellent Adventure, the true story of a great American road trip. So rather than kick and fight and scream and say that he still is the president, he said, "See you guys, I'm going on a road trip. No Secret Service, no nothing." He put his wife in a car and they just went on the longest road trip ever, seeing all these sights, just the two of them. The former president, the man who had just left office, drove around America with his wife. And so the author of this book, I'm really excited to get into it. The author of this book replicated the road trip and talked about all the places that Harry Truman went.
Wow.
So really excited. It's a short book, but I just picked it up and pretty excited to get into that.
I'm glad he and Bess got to have that time together.
Yeah.
After you've authorized the use of nukes on civilian populations, you got to do something to appreciate the nature. And so I'm glad Harry was able to have that time for himself. Allow me to recommend the children's book, Hippos Can't Swim by Laura Lynn de Siena, which is a charming book, really well received. Kirkus gives it a great review, I've just learned. So Hippos Can't Swim and other fun facts.
National Geographic hated it. It got 0 stars from National Geographic. Well, you've done very well. Question 5. This one's for all the marbles. If you get this wrong, I'm banning you from the podcast. You'll never be asked on again.
Okay.
Here's your question. Your music knowledge, super impressive. What is objectively the best album of all time?
Oh, man. The best album of all time. I mean, give me a genre at least, like Handel's Messiah, Sgt. Pepper. Like, what are we talking about?
I think personally, if I give you the genre of rock, I think most of the right answers would fall within that. And I could probably even say they would fall between the years of 1960 and 1980, in my personal opinion.
I mean, there's so many great jazz albums too, you know. I mean, my God. Dinah Washington Live and Sinatra at the Sands with Count Basie and Jimi Hendrix at Monterey, not Jimmy at Woodstock, Jimmy at Monterey. That's the one. My favorite Beatles album, I can tell you, is Revolver.
Yes.
Because that's, I think, the album where every version of the Beatles come together on one record. You can hear the mop tops, you can hear the drugs and the psychedelia, you can hear them inventing rock, you can hear them beginning to invent metal. I think they really invented metal with Helter Skelter. You can hear the love songs, the ballads, the psychedelia, George with spirituality, George writing just really good pop songs, Paul writing the most perfect love song ever, with Here, There, and Everywhere, John writing the best love song ever with In My Life. I would have to say it's hard to pick the greatest album of all time, but the greatest Beatles album is very much Revolver.
And is the Beatles the greatest band of all time?
Yes.
So then that answers the question.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know the greatest American band of all time. This is the debate we always have on my show, is what is the greatest American rock band? That's a tricky one. You realize how far behind England we are.
Yeah.
Its top 5 bands are all British or Irish. But I mean, some would say the Beach Boys studio, but the Beach Boys live kind of brings that down. I would say Velvet Underground, but that makes people think I'm trying to sell them drugs all the time. Best American band is a trickier question.
Yeah, I would say, best. And the Beach Boys, throughout the Beach Boys, even there's so much change there. If you're talking Pet Sounds,
it's Brian Wilson Beach Boys, and there's like Love Beach Boys. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
They're very different bands.
Absolutely.
One's a cover act. Well, what would get your vote for the greatest album of all time?
Blonde on Blonde.
Yeah, it's up there. I've seen Bob Dylan live over 60 times.
Wow.
And I can't even begin to say my favorite album. I can say my favorite songs on every album. Blonde on Blonde was the first Dylan album that my wife liked.
Okay.
That's how powerful that was.
I think that, I have criteria, I think, when I'm thinking about favorite albums, and A is like listenability. How much can I listen to it without getting sick of it? And that one, it never gets old for me. Pet Sounds is a great album. It's in like top 5, but I can get sick of it if I there's times when I just want to skip past it and listen to something else.
I agree.
But I think it has to do with the nostalgia in the lyrics of Blonde on Blonde, and I can tell you places I've been when I've been listening to those songs. Yep. And not everything does that for me.
The thing about Blonde on Blonde also, it is the nostalgia, but it still sounds cutting edge.
Yeah.
The fact they recorded it in Nashville is all the more remarkable because it still sounds like cutting edge rock as we know it being invented. Like, to go on that tour with the Hawks as they became the band, get booed and called Judas, then to release like a Rolling Stone, and then to just throw everything at the wall creatively. The box set for that album is astonishing, by the way, from the bootleg series for Blonde on Blonde. And that thin, wild Mercury sound is what Bob called it, they were trying to get. That was the first Bob Dylan album I ever bought myself, and I got it on cassette when I was a teenager. Nice. And it still blows my mind.
Do you still have it on cassette?
Yes, I do. I still saved a few cassettes, and that's one of them.
I have a few, and I don't currently have a working cassette player, but I would love to have the Magnavox boombox that I had when I was a kid. I should look on eBay for this, because
you can get them. They're all over the place. I'm trying to get my mom's boombox fixed.
That, how they, like, people love vinyl, audiophiles, that's a constant debate. There is something about the cassette sound, and I'm never going to argue that it's better. It's not better, but there's something about that sound, and it's probably nostalgia, that
Thurston
you just
Moore
can't.
From Sonic Youth said he listens to everything on cassettes. That's his favorite way of listening to music. So I get that.
Yeah, but it's probably nostalgia based, right? He probably says that because that was maybe the most formative medium in his career at that time.
Some guys just hate the convenience of random access. You want to fast forward and rewind to get to the song you want.
Yeah. I sometimes I will admit, when I'm listening to music on Spotify or whatever, there's a website called Vinylfied, and I'll get onto Vinylfied, and all it does is adds a vinyl hiss to whatever you're listening to. And there's something about it. I dig it. It's really,
That's so
it
cool.
really makes you feel that way. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You did,
Thank
you went 4 for 5 with an
You know,
asterisk.
I went 3.5 for 5.
Yeah, there's an asterisk on the fourth one about the hippos swimming.
Hippo question.
But I encourage you, ask your friends, can hippos swim? I really want to get more definitive answers on this. And listen to John Fugelsang on Sirius XM Progress 127. That's every day from 9 to 12.
Yeah, we're on the nighttime, or we're listening the next day on demand or on the Sirius XM app. And of course, you can always listen to the John Fugelsang podcast, where we have a lot of authors and newsmakers and celebrities and musicians and artists. And we've had everybody from Julie Andrews to Tyler Perry, from Jeff Bridges to RZA from Wu-Tang Clan. Both of Paul McCartney's guitarists on his current tour were on my show this week. We try to keep it interesting.
Incredible.
Everybody from Bernie Sanders to Chris Christie.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to listen to more.
What a pleasure. Thank you, Michael.
That is all for this week. Thank you so much to John Fugelsang for being our guest back in June of 2022. And thank you to you for listening. Here's the voice of a young Pablo Escobar.
Thank you for listening to The Internet Says It's True. To listen to episodes ad-free and a week early, support us on Patreon. You can do that at patreon.com/Michael Kent. If you learned something just now that you didn't already know, go to the Apple Podcast app and leave us a review with 5 stars and a few words. That helps us a ton, because that's how the algorithm works. I don't know what an algorithm is, but just do it. See you next week for a brand new episode of The Internet Says It's True!
The Internet Says It's True would like to thank the Patreon subscribers whose monthly contributions help to make this show possible. Sean Brown, Joshua Endress, Dallas Ray, Bryce Swanson, Eugene Anderson, Jim and Joanne Martin, Mitch and Andrew Joseph Kemplin, and the show's official Emperor, Kick Track. The show is written and produced by me, Michael Kent. The theme song is by Finite Music Forge, and all audio clips in this episode are used for education and commentary and used under Fair Use Title 17 USC Section 107. You can listen to past episodes by searching for The Internet Says It's True wherever you get your podcasts, and you can see bonus content at patreon.com/Michael Kent.